Okay, so let's talk about this for a minute. Why is it that when we are wrong or when we have done something wrong, our natural instinct is to be defensive? Why do we feel the need to make excuses or to justify our actions or to deflect blame onto somebody else? And why is it so hard for us to simply own up to our mistakes? In our society today, we're taught to think of ourselves as being good, moral people. And even if we know that we've done something wrong, it doesn't change the way that we feel about ourselves. But according to Robert Sternberg's triangular theory of love, in order for us to experience healthy, fulfilling love with other people, we must view ourselves first and foremost as being a good, moral person. So what happens when we go against our own morals and values? Well, according to Sternberg's research, the foundation of love is completely destroyed. Now, I want to be clear here. This isn't me saying that if you make one little mistake, that your relationship is doomed. No, of course not. What I am talking about is those times where you knowingly do something that goes against your morals and values, something that you know deep down inside is wrong, but you still do it anyway. So let's take, for example, the person who has decided to cheat on their spouse. Now, at the beginning of the relationship, they probably viewed themselves as being a good, moral person. They saw themselves as someone who would never cheat on their partner. But now that they've cheated, their view of themselves is completely changed. They now see themselves as being a bad, immoral person. And because of this, they can no longer experience healthy, fulfilling love with their partner. This is why most relationships that are broken by infidelity never really get repaired. It's very difficult for one person to continue viewing the other person as being a good, moral person after they have been cheated on. And the same thing can be said about any relationship that is broken by lies, manipulation, deception, abuse, or any other form of betrayal. In all of these cases, the person who is on the receiving end of the betrayal finds it very difficult to continue viewing the other person as being a good, moral person. But what's interesting is that the person who has betrayed them often has no problem viewing themselves as being a good, moral person. Even though their actions clearly show otherwise, they still manage to convince themselves that they are good people. How is it that they are able to do this? Well, it all has to do with the way that they view their actions. You see, most people tend to view their actions through rose-colored glasses. What I mean by this is that they tend to see their actions in the best possible light. For example, if you were to ask a thief why he stole, he might say something like, "I had to steal because I needed the money to buy food for my family." On the surface, this may sound like a reasonable excuse, but when you really stop to think about it, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. There are so many other things that this person could have done instead of stealing. He could have asked his friends or his neighbors for help. He could have gone to the local church or charity organization. He could have even begged, but instead, he chose to steal. Yet when we are faced with similar situations, we tend to look at our actions through rose-colored glasses. We come up with all kinds of reasons and excuses as to why we did what we did. And this is what allows us to continue viewing ourselves as being good, moral people despite our actions showing otherwise. For example, let's take the person who cheated on their spouse. They might say things like, "I only did it because my spouse wasn't meeting my needs," or "I was just drunk and I didn't know what I was doing," or "We were having an open marriage, so it's not really cheating." All of these statements are simply excuses that this person is using in order to make themselves feel better about what they did. But the truth is, none of these excuses make any sense whatsoever. There are so many other things that this person could have done instead of cheating. They could have talked to their spouse about their feelings. They could have tried to improve their marriage with the help of a counselor. They could have taken a break. But instead, they chose to cheat. And there is absolutely no excuse for that. When we look at our actions through rose-colored glasses, we allow ourselves to continue viewing ourselves as being good, moral people. But when we are able to remove those rose-colored glasses and see our actions for what they truly are, then we begin to experience feelings of guilt, shame, and regret. And this is what leads to us becoming defensive. We become defensive because deep down inside we know that we have done something wrong, and we are afraid that if we allow ourselves to fully accept that, then we will no longer be able to view ourselves as being good, moral people. So instead, we come up with all kinds of excuses and reasons as to why what we did was justified. And this is how we cope with the situation. But the problem with being defensive is that it destroys the foundation of trust in our relationships. When we are able to remove our rose-colored glasses and see our actions for what they truly are, then we must be willing to accept the consequences of our actions. And one of the most important things that we must do in these situations is to apologize sincerely and to make amends whenever possible. But too often we refuse to do this. Too often we become defensive and we try to make excuses for our actions. And this is what causes so many relationships to fail. So the next time you find yourself in a situation where you've done something wrong, I want you to remember this. It may be very difficult, but you must be willing to remove your rose-colored glasses. You must be willing to see your actions for what they truly are. And you must be willing to accept the consequences of your actions. This is the only way that you can begin to repair the damage that you have caused and to rebuild trust in your relationships. So, I want to read this quote again because I think it applies perfectly to this topic. I'm not ignoring you. I'm just giving you time to reflect on what you just said. Sometimes we get so caught up in the heat of the moment that we forget to think about what we are saying. We say things without thinking about the consequences of our words, and then we expect the other person to just brush it off and pretend like it never happened. But that's not fair to the other person. The least that we can do is to give them time to process what we have said and to come to terms with it. One of the biggest mistakes that we can make in relationships is assuming that the other person will always be there for us. We have to remember that every single one of us is mortal, and none of us knows how much time we have left. It could be 10 years from now, it could be 20 years from now, or it could be next year. None of us knows, and that's why it's so important for us to cherish the people who are in our lives right now and to appreciate every moment that we get to spend with them. Instead of getting angry at this person for giving us time to reflect on what we said, we should actually thank them for it, because they are giving us a second chance to do things right. So the next time you find yourself in a situation where you've done something wrong, I want you to remember this. It may be very difficult, but you must be willing to remove your rose-colored glasses. You must be willing to see your actions for what they truly are, and you must be willing to accept the consequences of your actions. This is the only way that you can begin to repair the damage that you have caused and to rebuild trust in your relationships. If you agree with this, please go ahead and type "I agree" in the comment section below. And if you want to learn more about this topic, I highly recommend reading a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. This is one of the best books ever written on the topic of relationships. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.